What if I told you that in just 1 week, few simple habits could completely shift the way you live, think, and feel? Not by adding more pressure or chasing perfection, but by making small, intentional changes that ripple through every area of your life. These aren't complicated systems or impossible routines. They're simple practices that anyone can adopt. Yet, the impact they create is powerful enough to change your energy, your focus, your relationships, and even your sense of peace. If you've been feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or disconnected, these habits might be the spark you've been waiting for. Asterisk habits that completely turned my life around in just 1 week. Yes, you heard that right, 7 days. I know it probably sounds almost unbelievable, almost too good to be true. But I promise you what I'm about to share isn't just a list of generic self-help tips you've already heard 100 times before. These are raw, real, and deeply honest habits that I personally tested, struggled through, and eventually embraced. They weren't easy, but they were powerful. And the results I experienced were nothing short of life-changing. I went through the resistance, the small victories, the moments of doubt, and the breakthroughs that came afterward. And because of that, I can say with full certainty that these habits transformed not just my schedule, but my mindset, my energy, and the way I show up for my life. That's why I can't wait to share them with you, because I believe they have the potential to do the same for you, no matter where you are in your journey. Whether you're craving more productivity, stronger mental health, or simply want to feel a shift toward positivity in your everyday life, these habits can guide you there. So grab your cup of coffee or tea, settle in somewhere comfortable, and let's dive deep together. I encourage you to stick with me all the way until the end, because these habits aren't abstract theories, they are practical, grounded, and 100% actionable. They are small shifts you can start making today, right now, without waiting for the perfect moment. And along the way, I'll also share parts of my own story, my honest struggles, the surprising lessons, and the real changes that came from applying these steps consistently. So without dragging it out any longer, let's get straight into it. Habit 1. Waking up early. The very first habit that altered my entire approach to life was learning to wake up early. Now, let me be completely transparent. Here I was never a morning person. My bed felt like my greatest ally, the snooze button like my best friend. Mornings for me used to be rushed, chaotic, and unsettled. Most days, I felt like I was starting my life already behind schedule. But one day, I made a decision. I was going to test this idea of waking up early, even though I doubted whether it would be worth the effort. I set my alarm for 5 a.m., and those first few mornings were honestly brutal. I dragged myself out of bed half asleep, wondering if I was torturing myself for nothing. But I pushed through, and by the third day, something almost magical happened. Started to notice the calm silence of the early hours. The world felt slower, softer, more peaceful. It was as if I had stumbled onto a hidden pocket of time that most people never touch. With those extra hours, I finally had the space to do things I always told myself I didn't have time for. I began with light movements, simple stretches, sometimes a short jog. Nothing extreme, just enough to awaken my body. I also started incorporating a short meditation practice, setting intentions for the day. These little rituals shifted my entire mindset, leaving me grounded, energized, and sharper for the rest of the day. Another unexpected benefit. I no longer felt like I was rushing through my mornings. I had time to eat a proper breakfast, sip my coffee slowly, and plan out my priorities. That slower, intentional start created a ripple effect that carried through the rest of the day. My stress levels dropped, my organization improved, and I felt more in control. One of the most memorable experiences was the morning I stepped onto my balcony and watched the sunrise. The sky shifted from grey to pink to gold, and in that quiet, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. That single moment taught me more about the beauty of early mornings than any book or lecture ever could. Now, I know waking up early isn't for everyone, but I encourage you to try it for at least 1 week. You don't have to start with 5 a.m. Begin by waking up just 15 minutes earlier than usual, and slowly build from there. You might be surprised by how much it changes your perspective, because ultimately, it's not about adding hours to your day, it's about reclaiming the way you use your time and choosing to begin your day with intention and clarity. Habit 2. Daily exercise. The second habit that dramatically changed my life was making daily exercise non-negotiable. And let me admit something, I wasn't always active. I used to dodge workouts with every excuse in the book. I'm too tired. I don't have time. I'll start tomorrow. Does that sound familiar? That cycle of postponing went on for years, until one day I told myself, enough. Just 1 week. Move your body every single day, no excuses. So I committed, and I kept it simple, 20 minutes a day. I rotated between yoga, jogging, and light strength training just to keep it interesting and avoid boredom. The first few days were rough. My body felt sore, my motivation dipped, and I questioned if it was worth it. But I reminded myself of my deeper reason. I wasn't doing this just to burn calories or tone muscles. I was doing it to feel alive again, to care for my body, calm my mind, and strengthen my spirit. By the 4th day, something clicked. I woke up feeling energized instead of sluggish. My mood lifted. I was less irritable, more focused, and surprisingly more optimistic. It was then that I realized exercise wasn't only a physical routine, it was mental therapy. Those 20 minutes became sacred time to disconnect from the noise of the world and reconnect with myself. I remember one particular morning vividly. I laced up my sneakers, stepped outside, and went for a jog. The air was crisp, the sky was clear, and as I ran, I felt this overwhelming sense of freedom. It was just me, the road, and my thoughts. In that moment, I felt lighter, both physically and mentally. That run reminded me why movement is medicine. I even tried yoga for the first time, and I'll be honest, I was skeptical. I thought I wasn't flexible enough, or that it wouldn't be a real workout. But after a few sessions, I completely shifted my perspective. Yoga taught me patience, presence, and the importance of listening to my body. It wasn't just exercise, it was self-discovery. Over time, I noticed changes in my posture, my energy, and my strength. But the greatest transformation happened in my mindset. Exercise became more than a habit. It became an act of self-care, a daily gift to myself. And here's what I learned. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need hours in the gym, and you don't need to push yourself to extremes. What you need is consistency and enjoyment. If you're struggling to start, my advice is simple. Start small. Find a movement you enjoy, whether it's dancing, hiking, walking, or yoga. Commit to just a few minutes each day and let it grow from there. Trust me, the benefits go far beyond physical fitness. This habit has the power to shift not only your body, but your outlook on life itself. Asterisk. Habit 3. Journaling. The third habit that transformed my life was journaling. To be honest, I used to think journaling was something only people with too much free time or overly reflective personalities did. I was skeptical. After all, who has time to sit down and write when life feels like a constant rush? But when I committed to just 1 week of consistent journaling, my perspective completely shifted, and it has since become one of the cornerstones of my personal growth journey. I started simple, no complicated rules, no fancy templates, just a plain notebook, a pen that felt good in my hand, and 10 minutes before bed. That was my deal with myself. 10 minutes of honesty. The first night, I stared at the empty page, unsure where to begin. Eventually, I just wrote about how my day went, what made me happy, what frustrated me, and what challenges I faced. As the days passed, the writing began to flow more naturally. I started peeling back the layers of my thoughts. I wrote about my dreams, my fears, my doubts, and my desires. Journaling turned into a conversation with myself, raw, unfiltered, and honest. That's when the magic began. I started noticing patterns in my behavior and my emotions. I saw where I was wasting energy on things outside my control, and where I actually had the power to act and change. One evening stands out clearly. I had a stressful day at work and felt completely overwhelmed. Instead of letting the frustration sit in my chest, I poured it all onto paper. I described exactly what triggered me, how it made me feel, and what I could do differently next time. By the time I set my pen down, I felt lighter. My thoughts were no longer tangled. I had clarity and direction. That simple act of reflection was more therapeutic than I ever imagined. Another powerful discovery came from tracking my small victories. I began writing about little milestones, no matter how insignificant they seemed at the time. Looking back on those entries filled me with pride and motivation. For example, I once documented how I prepared for a presentation I was terrified about. Reading my own notes on the preparation process, and then the relief of the positive outcome, gave me confidence that I could handle challenges more often than I believed. I also added a daily gratitude practice. Every night, I wrote down 3 things I was grateful for. At first, it felt repetitive, but over time, it changed my focus from what was lacking to what was abundant in my life. Even something as simple as a warm cup of tea, a kind word from a friend, or a stranger holding the door open for me became moments worth celebrating. One of my favorite entries was about a stranger who helped me carry my grocery bags on a day I was exhausted. Writing about that moment of kindness not only made me deeply grateful, but inspired me to become that person for someone else. Through journaling, I uncovered parts of myself I hadn't taken the time to notice. My insecurities, my strengths, my blind spots, and my growth, all of it had a place on those pages. It became a safe space where I could be brutally honest without judgment. Journaling wasn't just writing, it was therapy, clarity, and growth combined. If you've never tried it, I encourage you to give it a shot. Don't overthink it. You don't need perfect words or profound reflections. Just let your pen move. Write about your day, your emotions, or even random thoughts. The process itself is where the magic lies, and the clarity it brings might surprise you. Habit 4. Mindful eating. The fourth habit that shifted my life was mindful eating. And I'll admit, this one hit home hard, because for most of my life, I ate on autopilot. Meals for me were rushed and distracted affairs while scrolling through my phone, answering emails, or watching something on TV. I barely paid attention to what I was consuming, let alone how much. I didn't realize how disconnected I was from my food until I challenged myself to eat mindfully for just 1 week. Mindful eating is exactly what it sounds like. Paying full attention to the act of eating. Not just tasting, but truly experiencing your food, the flavors, the textures, the aroma, even the sounds of each bite. It's about slowing down enough to connect your body and mind with the food that fuels you. So I made a commitment. For that week, every meal would be eaten without distractions. No phone, no TV, no laptop. I set the table properly, even if it was just for me, and created a calm space to eat. At first, it felt old, almost too quiet. But soon, it became a ritual I began to enjoy. Before every meal, I took a few deep breaths to center myself and bring my focus to the present moment. Almost immediately, I noticed a difference. Food I had eaten hundreds of times suddenly felt brand new. A crisp vegetable had a satisfying crunch I'd never noticed before. Fresh fruit tasted sweeter, more vibrant, almost alive on my tongue. Even a simple meal felt elevated, like eating in high definition. Another big shift was how much more satisfied I felt after eating. By slowing down, chewing thoroughly, and really savoring each bite, I gave my body the time to signal fullness. Before, I often ate too quickly and overstuffed myself. But mindful eating helped me naturally eat less while feeling more nourished. One morning, I prepared a simple bowl of oatmeal. Normally, I would have eaten it in minutes while scrolling through social media. But this time, I took it slow, savoring the creamy texture and the gentle sweetness of the honey on top. What was once an ordinary breakfast became a grounding, mindful experience that set the tone for the rest of my day. I also began noticing how certain foods made me feel. Processed meals often left me bloated and sluggish, while fresh, whole foods gave me energy and lightness. This awareness didn't come from forcing strict diets or rules. It came naturally through observation. I began making better choices, not out of guilt, but out of a desire to feel good. Another revelation came from noticing the emotional triggers behind my eating. Sometimes I reached for snacks not because I was hungry, but because I was stressed, bored, or lonely. Mindful eating helped me pause, reflect, and ask, what do I really need right now? Sometimes the answer wasn't food, it was rest, movement, or simply calling a friend. One evening, I had a strong craving for dessert after dinner. Normally, I would have grabbed something sweet without thinking, but instead, I paused and asked myself if I was truly hungry. I realized I wasn't high, was just craving comfort after a long day. That awareness alone shifted my behavior. Instead of eating out of habit, I chose to relax with a book and a cup of tea. Mindful eating taught me that food is more than fuel. It's connection, presence, and gratitude. It's an opportunity to care for both the body and the mind. By simply slowing down and paying attention, I developed a healthier relationship with food and, more importantly, with myself. Habit 5. Limiting screen time. The fifth habit that truly reshaped my life was limiting screen time. And let me be honest, this one was not easy for me, and I know it probably won't be easy for many of you either. We live in a world where screens dominate almost every moment of our day. From scrolling through social media to binge-watching shows or constantly checking emails, it's far too easy to get pulled into endless digital loops. But I realized something important. All that screen time was silently draining me. It was harming my focus, eating away at my productivity, and even disrupting my sleep. So I decided to set some boundaries. Nothing extreme, but enough to make a noticeable difference. I gave myself a limit, 1 hour a day for non-work-related screen time. That meant no mindless scrolling on Instagram, no late-night YouTube binges, and no background TV marathons. At first, it was uncomfortable, almost like my fingers itched to grab my phone. I hadn't realized how much I relied on screens to fill every spare second. But I stuck with it, and slowly, everything began to change. The very first shift I noticed was time. Suddenly, my days felt longer. Without screens eating up hours of my life, I rediscovered old hobbies I had neglected. I picked up books I had been meaning to read. I started doodling again, experimenting with sketching like I used to as a kid. I even tried new recipes in the kitchen, which turned into a surprisingly joyful adventure. One night in particular stands out. Instead of collapsing in front of the TV after dinner, I decided to take a walk in the park. The fresh air, the quiet rustling of leaves, the sound of my footsteps, it was a simple, almost ordinary moment. Yet it felt incredibly refreshing compared to the screen-induced fatigue I was used to. That walk soon became a cherished ritual, something I looked forward to each evening. Another huge improvement came in my sleep. Before, I had a terrible habit of scrolling through my phone in bed, convincing myself I'd stop after just 5 more minutes. But 5 minutes easily turned into an hour, leaving me restless and overstimulated. When I stopped using screens before bedtime, I began winding down with healthier rituals, reading a physical book, reflecting on my day, even just breathing deeply in silence. As a result, my sleep became deeper, more restorative, and I woke up feeling refreshed rather than exhausted. Beyond the practical benefits, I also noticed a mental shift. Without the constant flood of news updates, social comparisons, and notifications, I felt calmer and more present. Conversations felt richer because I wasn't half distracted. I became more attentive to the people around me, more engaged in my daily routines, and more appreciative of small, real-world details I had overlooked before. One afternoon, I sat at a local cafe with just a notebook and a pen, no phone, no laptop. For hours, I wrote down thoughts, sketched ideas, and reflected on goals. It was one of the most peaceful and productive afternoons I'd had in years. That sense of connection to myself and to the present moment was something screens had never given me. Of course, there were temptations. There were times when I slipped and reached for my phone out of habit. But instead of beating myself up, I gently reminded myself why I was doing this. For clarity, presence, and peace. Each time I refocused, it got easier, and here's what I realized. Limiting screen time isn't about completely cutting technology out of your life. It's about balance. It's about using screens intentionally rather than letting them control you. If you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, or disconnected, try this. Start small. Cut down even just an hour a day and see what happens. Use that time for something meaningful, moving, creating, or simply being still. You might be surprised at how much more alive, present, and fulfilled you feel when you step away from the digital noise and return to the real world. Closing thoughts, and with that, we've reached the end of this journey through the 5 habits that dramatically changed my life in just 1 week. Looking back, I can honestly say this experiment wasn't just about adding a few new routines. It was about reimagining how I want to live. Each habit, waking up early, exercising daily, journaling, practicing mindful eating, and limiting screen time gave me something different. Yet they all worked together to create real transformation. The most important lesson I've learned is this: change doesn't require massive leaps. It's not about being perfect or overhauling your entire life overnight. It's about small, deliberate steps taken consistently. Progress, not perfection. That's where the true transformation happens. If any of these habits resonated with you, I encourage you to try them out. Start with just one. Commit for a week, stay curious, and see how it feels. Adjust it to fit your lifestyle, your pace, and your needs. And don't be afraid of setbacks. What matters is showing up again and again. I'd also love to hear from you. Which of these habits are you excited to try? Or do you already practice some of them in your own life? Share your experiences in the comments. I want this to be more than just me sharing my story. I want this to be a community where we learn and grow together. If this video added value to your life, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss future content. We've got so much more coming: practical insights, timeless lessons, and powerful habits you can integrate into your everyday life. And if you know someone who might benefit from this message, share it with them. A single conversation or idea can sometimes be the spark that changes everything. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Remember, small changes lead to big results. Keep growing, keep evolving, and never underestimate the power of transforming your ordinary routines into extraordinary moments of growth. Stay strong, stay mindful, And, as always, stay awesome.